Welcome back to the podcast Just A Convo, the podcast where we talk about the things that you may not always dare to. Today I have a previous guest on by the name of Gary Phipps to speak about prepping, gun rights, gun laws and everything American with an eagle flying over our heads. If you haven't already, make sure to sign up for our free newsletter where you will receive deep dives into the topics from these conversations you already listened to. And on top of that, you will also automatically be entered to any of our future giveaways where winners have received books and other items with a value of over $50 each. To sign up, simply go to justaconvo.com/newsletter. One more time. Simply go to justaconvo.com/newsletter. Now, time for episode 19 with Gary Phipps. Coming onto the show for the second time now, Gary Phipps and I last spoke about his incredible journey as a paratrooper and how he incredibly enough thrives in high pressure environments. However, today he is back because there's still one specific part of you, Gary, that I want to dive much deeper into, and that is what is called prepping. And so, without dragging it out even further, let's just get into it and welcome, Gary.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, we should get right into it. I mean, last time we can kind of go off on a tangent.
Yeah, we did. We went off the whole episode.
But that's okay. There's we got time.
Exactly. So first question being, you are a fan of prepping, but how did you get into it?
It's kind of over time, like kind of snowballed. I mean, my uncle that kind of raised me, he was better with outdoors stuff, always taking me out, for walks, showing, the family property, going out into the woods and also just being a kid with my friends, always being outside of the woods, playing army, playing survival, like, Rambo action movie stuff. And then after I got in the army and did that more, I spent a lot of time sleeping outside in the woods, building little, lean-to cubby holes to sleep in for the night, did, cold weather training, did all kinds of cool stuff. And it's fun. I mean, honestly, it's fun for me. I love to go camping, but also the practical side is what appealed to me. Cause I'm like, these aren't just little skills that I'll never end up using. These are skills that could possibly, come into play later on. And, I like it. It's just fun.
Yeah. When you said the cold training, you made me think of a guy called Wim Hof. Do you know him?
Yes. With the breathing exercises.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I seen that and I'm like, nah, I'm good with that. Not that kind of cold weather training.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty extreme though. I don't know how that works, but I mean, he climbed like part of Everest, with no shirt on, and I'm like, all right, that doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't make sense. It's so insane. And for the person listening to this, I'm gonna throw up a picture on if you're watching a video of this, I'm gonna throw up a picture of me going into some icy waters around Christmas time this year or last year, and it's really fun doing it because you get such a rush of adrenaline.
Yes. Yeah. Whenever I played football in high school, and we used to do these 3-a-day workouts. So 3 times a day, you're just in the heat working out. So our bodies would be destroyed, and they would have an ice bath ready. And we got it super cold, just bags and bags of ice. And I found out whenever I jumped in, it was a shock, but then my whole body gets warm. It's like it gets warm and relaxing. And I'm like, I like this. And they're like, well, just don't stay in for too long.
Yeah. But it's really incredible how the body can actually manage to do it, though. Because, I mean, the first moments of being in the ice cold freezing water, it's full on panic. Like, you can barely breathe. But give it 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and then you're going to find yourself that your breathing is much slower. You can take deep breaths, and you feel, like you said, a sense of warmth. Even it sounds insane saying it, but you do feel warm.
Does. Yeah, like if you sit still, if you move around a whole bunch, it's still going to be cold. But if you just kind of just sit there, it's almost like a layer surrounds your body, and it feels good.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to, without dragging it out even more, but when I got out of the freezing cold water, even then you're still warm. Like I'm standing there in literally just a beanie on and some what's it called? The things you put on your hands?
Just gloves.
Yeah, gloves. Thank you. and I'm feeling like I'm warm, but it's like -10 Celsius. But so that's a side note. And prepping.
Yes.
What does it actually mean?
I mean, to me, prepping just means more on the mental side. A lot of people and people that claim to be preppers, or they claim to be so just by collecting a lot of gear, or saving a bunch of food, having rice, stuff like that. But I think that just having the prepper kind of mentality is more important, and kind of diagnosing situations, and it's almost a fun mind game too when you do it. I mean, and some people can take it too far. You can obviously become paranoid. Some people, that's all they think about. They're like, oh, what if this bad thing happened, and they're all like doomsday, minded. You can have that in the back of your mind, but it's not healthy to just like think that's always going to happen, but still being situationally aware to realize, okay, well, hey, if I had to drive to Texas and I'm going to be by myself, do I have any way to protect myself if, a mugger comes up on me, because I am by myself, especially if you're a female, by yourself, that could be dangerous. You got to think of these routes and ways to get out of that situation. Because if not, you'll just be caught off guard. And what good does that do you? It's balancing a fine line between being ignorant and over prepared. It's just like right there in the middle. What's your backup plan, sort of a thing. And that's what I like most about prepping.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure most people, when they hear the word prepping and you hear that a person is into something called prepping, then I'm sure the picture that is being painted in your mind is something, like you said, is someone who is hoarding a bunch of items, just not really doing anything with it, but just hoarding a bunch of cans of food, cans of whatever, and just hoarding it. While not actually being prepared, not actually knowing how to use it in case you would have to. And so I think that's a really important part that you touched on, to actually be prepared, I guess mentally, and like knowing how...
Skills.
Yes, skills,
skills
exactly.
Are good. And like myself, I'm not 100% great with a whole lot of actual skills when it comes to like growing food and all that. So me and my wife were planning pretty heavily for this spring. We gardened a little bit last year, but this spring we're going to be tilling up our backyard, learning how to grow all these different kinds of vegetables and stuff like that are sustainable. And we're going to learn how to can them and store them properly without the need for electricity. So, I mean, we at least have that knowledge, and we get in the kind of working progress of it. And the more food we grow too, I mean, shoot, that just saves money. And it's healthier, no pesticides, all kinds of benefits. And it's a hobby. I mean, like a lot of people complain, oh man, I'm so bored, there's nothing to do, or, I'll just sit around and watch hours and hours of mindless TV, which, I mean, we do our fair share of that too. But, it'd be nice, to just get in a different rhythm, get outside, get in the sun. I mean, there's not many places that are open right now that you can really go for entertainment. So why not, teach yourself something?
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, it saves money at the end of the day. And so like, you don't have to be like prepared for doomsday, but you could save a few bucks each month.
Yes.
And probably eat healthier too.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a ton of crops too that you can grow. The average person can grow on 1 acre of land that if you map it out right and you plant at the right times, you can sustain a family of 5 for a year.
Wow.
There's a couple different diagrams. You can go on Google and look it up. But it's just a handful of everyday gardening stuff: potatoes, onions, tomatoes. And there's hundreds of ways you can store it and cook it. And if you have neighbors or a local group that maybe are just a friend that will get into this with you, imagine trading goods with your friend. And you can just trade and be like, hey, do you got any eggs? Yeah, I got some chickens. You got any potatoes? Sure, I'll trade you a bag of potatoes for 2 dozen eggs. Okay, cool. and then you're done.
It feels like a kind of a lifestyle to
Yeah, and that's what I would like to get to. Because I mean, nowadays, I mean, everybody is so consumer driven. They're consumer dependent. I mean, 99% of people out there would just lose their minds if they couldn't go to the store and pick up what they needed. I mean, they already lose their minds when there's no toilet paper, you know, if they go. So, you know, what are they going to do when they can't get the essentials that they need? And I mean, honestly, you know, we'd be in the same position. I mean, I got a little bit of canned food saved up and some other stuff, but I mean, we'd basically be in the same boat as everybody else as far as food goes. That would just be a horrible situation anyway. But hopefully before it got to that point, I'd make some adjustments.
yeah. I wanted to ask: do you try to consciously to eat more food that you would be able to grow yourself or take care of yourself?
During the summer, this last year, we did. I mean, we had tomatoes, we had some onions, and you know, a lot of herbs and strawberries and stuff like that. And we try to eat them as much as possible. I mean, last year was kind of a test run. But the soil here in Illinois, where I live, is amazing. And it would kind of be dumb to not take advantage of that. And also it's like, you know, why do we spend so much money taking care of our lawns when, you know, you could just grow some food?
Yeah, I mean, you're entirely right. I agree 100%. And, but why is this so important? I see why it is, why I would think it's important, but to you, why is it so important to you?
I got a family. I got a wife and I got 3 kids, and it's important to me. I mean, I would say every generation. I mean, if you ask any middle-aged dude in any time period, they probably think, oh, the world's going to hell. You know what I mean? And they probably think, you know, in the next 20 years, everybody's going to be, you know, living in some communist dictatorship or something like that. And you know, it could be that way. I don't know. You know, the world is pretty crazy in 2020 and 2021. But you know, even if I want to teach my kids kind of resiliency, I think, and a level of independence, because with, you know, economies going bad, people losing jobs, a lot of people really depend on social programs, which I get that there are people who legitimately need those programs, but I also think a lot it can be used as a crutch and an excuse for a lot of people to not try their hardest to get out of that situation. And the reason I say that is that works with anything. Let's say you're a kid that just moved out of your parents' home and you go to college, and you know your parents got a little bit of money that they'll hook you up with, you know, if you need it. And then, you know, you're going to college, you know, you're frivolous, spending a little bit of money, and then you end up broke, and you're like, Mom, Dad, you know, can you spot me, you know, $1,000? They're like, yeah, here you go. And then you're like, oh, you're good. And you don't learn anything from that behavior. And what happens is you become dependent on that parental money, or in a social situation, you become psychologically dependent on that steady either check that comes in, you know, or whatever it might be. And those programs, they don't necessarily have to last forever. So if somebody becomes dependent on them, or even partially dependent on them, when they go away, then what are you going to do? You know, and I would rather my kids learn the situation of, oh crap, I got no money and I have no backup. So how am I going to fix this? You know, how am I going to change my behavior? Next time I go to the store, am I going to buy this, you know, candy bar and $3 energy drink? Or am I going to be like, I can't afford that, and save my money, you know, for the actual important costs that you have?
Yeah, that's a really great point that you touched on. And I pride myself in being very independent, and maybe too independent. Sometimes I maybe should have asked for help, but I have one single time I've asked for economical help from my parents, and that was when I transitioned from full-time studies to finding a job. And so there was 1 month where money was running low, and I genuinely had no way of gaining any kinds of money that month. And so I asked my parents, and they solved the situation, easy and done. I my dad gave me $1,000, 10,000 crowns. But that's the only time that I have ever asked for economical help. And although I do live in the same city as my parents, so I still have that kind of safety net that if I would like fuck up really bad, I could just quit this apartment and move back to my parents, and I would be fine.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's fine to like. I also have that to an extent with family that I have, but it's important that you at least, that not only you as the recipient of whatever kindness that might be coming towards your way, whether it be social help or parental, at least you understand it, and then they also don't continue it if it becomes a problem. Because I know for a fact, if I would go to my family and be like, hey, I need a little bit of money, they'd be like, yeah, sure. But then, if it, next month, and then the next month, they'd be like, nah, not doing it no more. Because they know it's better for me.
yeah. But that's a good thing too. And
yes,
I mean, Sweden in the world is kind of known, as far as I understand, is kind of known as the country with 1,000 different social benefits and safety nets and etc. etc. And it's
in a
true.
Beautiful country and beautiful people.
Yeah, that's.
I want to visit one day. Honestly, the scenery there looks amazing.
You're more than welcome to. But
great.
And so with these social nets, one of them is if I would lose my job right now, I would be able to get money equal to, I think, 75% of my income that I used to have. But in order to get those that chunk of money, I need to be part of a union. Because if I'm not part of a union before I lose my job, then I would not get that money. And also to be part of the union, you have to pay a certain monthly fee, which is a percentage of your income.
Okay.
And me being a really cheap ass person, I've decided I'm not part of a union, and I probably should be, because there's a lot of safety nets that I would gain from being part of a union. And it's not really a conscious decision that I've made to, like, I'm not going to be part of a union. It's just kind of something that I didn't really need when I was studying, and then I started working, and I was kind of just whatever. I mean, I'm gonna be fine. And now today, I still think, well, I'm gonna be fine, because what I am doing, I'm saving a whole bunch of money, because I am a cheap ass person. I don't.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I splurge on certain specific things, but I also...
They're probably useful things that you use or will come in handy.
Definitely. Like, I've upgraded some of the podcast equipment, for example, and things that I
will
actually
pay
use.
off in the end in its own. So that's an investment, I would say.
Yeah, it is. But end note, my point being is that I pride myself in being independent and being able to, if I would lose my job, I would be able to live on my own, live off of the money that I've saved for a certain amount of time, for a few months. And during that time, I would find another way to gain some sort of income. And I think back to
what gives you that what gives you that confidence, though? Because that confidence is important. You said you would find another way. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of people lack that, because I think that same way. I tell my wife, she's like, oh man, what would happen if you lose your job tomorrow? I'll find a way. I'll make it work, because I'm not going to sit by while my wife and kids don't have what they need. So it's like a drive almost, I think.
Yeah, honestly, I have no idea what gives me that confidence, but I guess in some way I've always made it work. And I'm not here saying that I've had some kind of difficult time growing up. I mean, my family earns their normal average income, and I've had a great upbringing. And sure, I've had some like really shitty jobs that the bosses weren't perfect and the pay were awful, but But it worked. I made it work. Even though it was a shitty pay and a shitty job, it was still a pay. And it worked. It made me able to pay rent, and I was always able to find a job. And I guess an important note is that throughout growing up, I've built, or rather, I guess a better phrase would be tried to build businesses. And literally, up to this point, all of them have failed. But I'm not embarrassed to say that. I mean, it's something that I really enjoy doing, and I was really passionate about it. And despite that, it failed.
You learn a lot.
Yeah, I've learned a whole ton of lot. And really the first thing that is starting to shape out to be a business is this podcast. And it's shaping up very nicely. It's growing, and it's really exciting to see. And it's the first kind of success that I'm seeing. But so I think that's where my confidence comes from the failures.
Yes.
Because I learn every single time I fail. And I think that's where most people's problem are. Is that they're afraid to fail because they haven't failed before.
And it teaches you resiliency to fail, because what people are afraid of is they're afraid to fail, and then they're just forever a failure. But whenever you fail and you come back, it teaches you, oh, well, if I fail, it's just temporary, and I learn from it, so it's kind of a positive. And then it makes you more willing to try different things that other people might feel is, a foolish pursuit or taking a risk, because then you're like, well, so what, it's my life.
exactly But you said that you wanted to teach your kids resilience and I guess experience life more. How do you teach resilience, especially to kids?
Not treating them not like a kid, honestly. I mean, definitely I give my kids so much love. They know I love them. I cuddle them, I hug them. Our house is full of love, and they know that. But also at the same time, we don't, let them, whine about things that you shouldn't whine about, or act spoiled or selfish or unappreciative for things. If they get something, brand new that they said they really wanted, for Christmas, and then they leave it on the floor, they throw it down, they're going to get an earful about it. They're going to understand. We're going to explain it, why that's a bad thing, and why, other kids don't have what they have, and they need to appreciate that. Or if they're like, I want a drink, instead of my wife or me getting up, we're like, well, you can get a drink. And they will go in there, get a cup, pour it themselves. I saw a video of this 4-year-old on a ranch out in like Montana. She was birthing a calf from, she was pulling it out, reaching into the animal, pulling out the leg. And I told my daughter, I said, do you see her? I was like, she is the same age as you. And she was like, what? And they're capable. They're capable of it. But so many parents want to be those hover parents, try to watch everything they do. I mean, I was a 90s kid. I used to roam the streets. I played on the railroad tracks. I mean, there's some things you can't do nowadays that you used to be able to, and for good reason. But at the same time, that's how they learn. They're going to get hurt. They're going to touch something hot one time, and they're going to be like, ah, crap. They're going to be like, that's hot. And you got to let them do that. You got to let them do it.
Definitely. Yeah, I spoke to another lady was quite recently, I think 2-3 weeks ago, about this specific thing, kids experiencing failures in a way. I'm gonna kind of rephrase what she said. When a kid falls, almost every parent's reaction is, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? Do you need a hug? No, don't cry, I'll wipe those tears. Yep. And I mean, it's really sweet, it's wonderful, and the kid is gonna probably feel much better very immediately, very, very quickly. But instead of doing that, what you should be doing, she said, is to acknowledge that it is hurting if the kid fell and scrubbed their knee, for example. acknowledge that it is hurting and say, oh, is it hurting? Where is it hurting? Okay. Feel that pain. Feel it. I mean,
learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, not in a brutal way, but just, yeah, it does hurt, and that's okay. Instead of going, I guess it's about, instead of teaching the kid that it's not okay that it's hurting, teach them that it is okay that it's hurting, and you will be fine despite hurting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Or teach them not to expect to be coddled, and not to expect necessarily even that other people will care that you are hurt. Because some people will be going through something in life and they feel like everybody's out to get them because nobody's, being that mom in their life, being like, oh, are you okay? Oh, it's okay. Or you could say, hey, yeah, that sucks, but, make a change, fix it, do something about it, almost get mad at the situation and use that as kind of motivation to get your butt up,
Yeah, it's such a great point. I get, this is the topic. When people expect to be, like you said, almost be cuddled, even as adults, even like my age. I mean, I'm only 21 years old, but at my age, when they see or they experience hardships, they're going through something tough, whether it be like mental health related or just life, like they lost their job, they're having a tough time at work or whatever it is, and they say that to their surroundings, and they expect to be replied back with, oh no, poor you, are you okay, can I help? And while that's great that people offer help, you shouldn't expect that. What you should be doing is, like you said, get off your ass and do something about it.
Yep.
Because no one else is going to do anything about it. The only thing that's going to happen is you're going to go downhill very fast.
And that reminds me, whenever I was in the Army, I was trying to get promoted from specialist to sergeant. And there's a whole system you got to go through. There's a point structure you got to meet. You have to go to specific boards in front of people and present yourself kind of like an interview. And there's a process, basically. Well, I was trying to get that process started. And I told my sergeant, I said, hey, when am I going to get promoted? Or, nobody's come to me about anything about this or that. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes, nobody cares that you get promoted except for you. So you have to make it happen. And I said, whoa. I was like, okay, yeah. Okay. That's right. I get it. And then I marched everywhere. I got all the paperwork I needed to get. I talked to this person, talked to that person, and I made it happen. But it's just like in real life. Nobody cares if you're struggling, really. I mean, you might have a family member that cares, but at the end of the day, they got their own life to run. They got their own stuff. Like, nobody cares about your own life as much as you do. And you should treat it accordingly.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Do you think we're losing parts of that especially for our young generation? I guess maybe my generation and the ones after me.
I think even I think every generation says that, the generation after them is, but I mean, and there's pluses and minuses to everything, the whole technological thing. Well, if that's the way the world's going, maybe today's youth needs to have experience on it because everybody else will. Kids nowadays need to know how to start a Zoom session for school. Yeah. So it's like, and you can get angry and be like, oh, I wish they played outside more, but that's kind of how you survive in today's world, whether you like it or not. So there's aspects, that I think our kids are losing that they don't realize out there. Because, I mean, I considered myself to be lucky to grow up kind of in an in-between era. I was at the end of, like, the outdoor, no technology area. And then I was also there for when technology first started really taking off. And I was there I played the original Mario, that was sick. And, I remember all those things coming out and I'm only 34, I remember this stuff whenever it happened, but I played outside and I did all that. I rode my bike during the summer, scraped my knee, hung out with my friends in clubhouses, and then, but also I learned how to use AOL Instant Messenger and like all those old school platforms, BearShare, LimeWire, and got to grow up with it. So I understand both sides of the coin. And I think, it's important to have balance with everything, including that. So, you know, if you feel yourself, man, I kind of feel like I've been cooped up for days on end, you know, I've been on Facebook or I work all day on the computer. Well, maybe you need to spend a day out at the park. Maybe just get out, you know, do something outside to kind of kick your mind into a different set, like to maybe make you think different things, break away from the pattern, get out of the rut. And in doing that, I think just makes you feel healthier overall, but it improves at least my mental cognitive abilities.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. But so being prepared for or rather preparing yourself and your loved ones and your kids is great, but what are we actually preparing for? What would you say is the number one thing that you are scared to might actually happen?
Yeah. And I wrote about this in one of my articles. It was kind of like getting in the mindset, a thought process of prepping. And what I try to break down to people, and I do this in my everyday life too, like with a group of friends, if, you know, we're having kind of a, you know, little hangout session, all having some drinks or whatever, and we'll be talking about different topics. And I'll ask somebody, I'll be like, well, you know, what do you think, you know, is your process? You know, what is the most realistic thing? I mean, have you thought about it? Like, what are you really scared about happening? And usually most civilians, whenever they think of the worst case scenario, they'll think of the thing happening, like, oh, every place runs out of food or there's no more power. And, you know, that's scary. I mean, obviously, I know that's scary, but then usually they stop there. They almost, a lot of my friends, whenever I brought this up initially, were like, oh, well, that's just morbid to think about. And I'm like, is it morbid, or have you just never been through that full thought process of where would you go? What would you do? And in order to get there, you have to think for yourself, what is the most realistic scenario? Because each scenario is different. So some preppers, they believe nuclear fallout. You know, they think, oh, there's going to be nuclear war and this is going to happen. And they base all their prepping off of that one scenario, basically. Or another one, they think a widespread disease, you know, like COVID or whatever is going to happen. So they make sure each one of their family members has a fully functioning hazmat suit and, like, you know, endless supplies of like disinfectant. And they're only planning for that thing. So I try to go more generalistic when it comes to prepping. And as far as my scenario goes, I mean, if I'm being 100% kind of guessing of, or like honest of what I would guess would happen, it would be a mixture of global inflation, I think, currency economies going down the drain, basically. After that happens, civil unrest from food shortages and water shortages, medical needs. And then after that, basically, you know, lawlessness, nobody to turn to, and then kind of, you know, disappear or get taken over by another country after that. Who knows? Like we get absorbed, you know, and then that could happen to anybody in any country. But I mean, that would be if I was being dramatic, that would be the rabbit hole I'd go down. But it would start with basically hyperinflation of money and economies kind of going down the drain, which, I mean, some people might say that's kind of happening, but then again, people also said that was happening in 2008 and, you know, so on. So you can't really pinpoint it. And like I said before, every generation of middle-aged dude thinks, you know, the world's going to end in the next 20 years. But I mean, it's just better, I guess, keep it in the back of your mind. Like I said, you don't have to dwell on it all the time. You don't have to become a super paranoid doom and gloom person. I'm still enjoying my life. I do things with my family. I love my friends, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also in the back of my mind, like, all right, well, you know, if I had to make it from here to there, you know, if they, you know, locked down this area or, you know, they were doing this, you know, what would I do? I got a wife and kids. I mean, I have to think about that. Yeah.
So it makes a lot more sense to prepare for something that you're describing, like for example, like an economical collapse, or because in my mind, like preparing for like a zombie apocalypse, global virus. I mean, okay, we are living in a pandemic, but a virus that would completely shut down the whole world, or whatever it is, or a nuclear fallout. Then I mean, sure, it could happen, but like, how big is the chance or the risk? Not that big from my guess.
Absolutely. Now, one thing I do like about the whole zombie scenario is it actually, if you just take away the zombies themselves, the rest of it would kind of be accurate as far as lawlessness, no electricity, no steady supply of food. People will probably join up in communities and gangs of people to protect their own kind. And there'll be infighting, there'll be fighting, there'll be people getting banished from communities. All kinds of crazy stuff like that is totally within the realm of possibilities. And I think most preppers know this, but it almost makes like prepping more fun, because if you were prepping for a zombie apocalypse versus prepping for just a generalized prepping situation, your preps would look generally the same. I mean, you're going to want food, you're going to want transportation, you're going to want steady water supply, you're going to want ammunition, you're going to want firearms to protect yourself and your community, you're going to need medical aid, you're going to need skilled people that know how to build, maybe doctors, nurses, and you're going to try to get that whole group of mess together so you can be like, hey, we're all in this together, but then you have other things that shoot off from that, like who would be in charge? What kind of government is that group going to have? Everybody's got their own goals. What if one person's like, no, I'm trying to make it to San Antonio to see my grandma. And it's like, all right, well, that's your mission, dude. Like, we're doing this thing here. How do you vote on that?
Right, yeah. It makes me think of The Walking Dead, the series. But it's like you said, it could most definitely happen. Or, I'm not saying zombie apocalypse, but like the
collapse.
Yeah, the collapse and the reaction that would bring, and the societies that you described. But so I want to address, I'm looking at the time, and we got plenty of time so far. But one thing I think is sort of the elephant in the room while talking about these topics, prepping and being prepared, is firearms. And you, speaking from the perspective of someone living in the US, and me speaking from the perspective of a Swedish person, it's two very different perspectives.
Yes.
So starting off, do you own firearms?
Absolutely. I got a shotgun and a handgun behind me right now.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Do you think firearms should have a place in normal citizens, average citizens' lives?
Absolutely, I do.
Okay, why?
Well, are you sure you want to go down this rabbit hole?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So there are a lot of gun nuts out there, but let's start with numbers for one, and I'll tell a quick story before I get into it. So I have a friend of mine that he's a wrestling fanatic, like a U.S. WWE style wrestling, And so he and a group of people, they'll fly to the U.S. every year to meet up and go to these events. It's just what they do. It's a little club of theirs. Well, he came to the U.S. and he was a friend of one of my friends. So he come over to my house, and he's Australian. They can't have civilian-owned firearms. I think they're allowed to have certain hunting rifles on like farms and stuff or something like that. But they did away with that a number of years ago. And so he's never fired a weapon. So we invited him out to my farm to have a shoot day. He went out there and we had everything for him. We had handguns, AR-15s, we had shotguns, we had, big rifles, we had, pistols, revolvers, everything. And he had an absolute blast. It was a fun environment. Everybody there was kind, knew what they were doing. We were shooting into a pond, and he was like, man, he goes, this is so great, And he's like, I wish we had, this in Australia, He's like, it's not like how I imagined it. He thought it would just be scary. And, once you shoot a number of guns and take them apart and understand the mechanics of them and how, they're dangerous. Absolutely. But so is a shovel when used incorrectly. So is a vehicle when used incorrectly, a knife. I think, what is it? England's banned knives now. You have to be like 18 to even buy like a butter knife or something like that. And I'm like, come on, man. I was like, that's crazy. Yeah. So in my opinion, they do they should be in civilian hands, specifically civilians, more than anything else. And also, I explained to him, with him being an Australian, because he also has views on guns and stuff. And whenever the Capitol got stormed the other day, he said to me, he goes, well, what the heck, man? He's like, what's going on over there in America? And I said, yeah, it's crazy right now. And I said, but I'm happy that my citizens and my fellow countrymen have the ability to get rid of a government if it came down to it. I'm not saying that this was needed at all. But let's say the government really did become tyrannical. Well, let's say they were pushing laws that were just unconstitutional, for our country and just the human rights in general. I mean, and you could say, well, that's an extreme. Well, you can take a look at Venezuela. You can take a look at pre-Nazi Germany and how it led to those civilians being under the control of regimes maybe they didn't even necessarily want. But in Venezuela, after they had their weapons taken away, I think it was in the mid-90s or something like that. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, they were running over civilians in armored personnel carriers. And the civilians were trying to fight back with rocks. They were trying to get rid of a dictator with rocks. And guess what? You can't do that. You got to maintain sufficient arms and equipment to defend yourself and your family, your community from any, whether it be a foreign oppressor that comes to your country or your own government. And also just general safety for your, like, let's say somebody breaks into your home and they have a gun. Do you think criminals are going to follow gun laws? They're not. And
of course,
and that's my thing is, why put the good civilian at a disadvantage when the criminal will most likely have a firearm?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is a good point. I want to explain my stance on it.
No, absolutely.
I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with guns and firearms, etc. What I think is the problem is when there's a lot of guns out there, when not everyone, but almost everyone can get their hands on one legally. And I've never shot an actual real gun or rifle or anything. The closest thing I've shot is airsoft, an airsoft rifle. It's really fun. It's so fun.
Oh, it's so fun. But it's and what is fun about shooting that airsoft rifle is the exact same reason why shooting a normal pistol or a rifle is fun. Because you get so much pleasure when you can line up that front sight post and that rear sight post and hit a target about the size of a quarter from 25 meters off. And it gives you confidence. You're like, wow, I can use this tool effectively if I needed to. And that just gives you, it's fun. I mean, it's really fun.
yeah, definitely. And actually, even my one of my uncles is I don't know his actual place, but one of the top people in like sharpshooting.
Really?
In the, what is it called? Scandinavia. Sharpshooting. I have no idea what it's called, but it's like a big ass gun.
Yeah.
It's
now,
really
I know
huge
they do it
and
in the
heavy.
Olympics. Yeah, they have something like that in the Olympics where they have like counterweights and they have like all kinds of stuff on it and crazy looking sights, but it's so accurate. Like they can hit the tiniest thing from like 100 meters away, and I'm like, that's impressive.
yeah, and so I'm saying that because I do have respect for like the sport and the experience, the skill, and also just the enjoyment of having guns and shooting guns. But that being said, I definitely don't think that should be any kind of reason for arguing that civilians should be able to have guns. I mean, I get that it's really fun and all, but that can't be the reason to own it.
No, it's not for, I would say, the majority of American gun owners anyway.
Okay. What is the reason? What do you say?
Personal independence and personal liberty and freedom from basically anybody that would threaten the way you want to live your life or tell you, what you can and can't do. I mean, like I said, I got a wife and 3 kids, and who has the authority to tell me how I see fit to keep them protected and defended in my own household that I own? There's no reason. And you don't want crazy Bob, that lives, one town over, stockpiling, ammonium nitrate and fertilizer and bomb making material and stuff like that. I get that. And as much as I don't agree with the ATF, we have them right now. And there is an astounding amount of legislation and laws and regulations against guns right now. I mean, if you're really following the U.S. Constitution, in the Second Amendment, it says shall not be infringed. And the Second Amendment is interpreted a lot of different ways by a lot of different people, because honestly, it's not written well. It's written vague, but I think it's written vague on purpose, because it shall not be infringed. And what not being infringed means is no limits on what the civilian populace can do to defend themselves when it comes to arms. And there's a lot of those already. So let's say Chicago, for instance. Chicago has the strictest gun laws in the country. Guess what else they have? The highest murder rate by gun violence. Why is that? Just like I said earlier, criminals do not follow gun laws. Now, if you say it's a gun volume problem, like there's so many guns in the U.S., the U.S. has the most guns per capita than the second country by a long shot. And the population difference is a big thing too. Like in Australia, they got rid of the guns there, civilian ownership for the most part that they know of. I guarantee you tons of households down there have guns still. And that'll always be the case. But their Australia's population is about the size of LA in the United States. Yeah. And that difference means the population numbers are crazy. I think for every 100 people in the U.S., 120 people own guns, meaning multiple households own way more guns than people, that don't. And with that being said, there's a couple things. You can never get rid of all the guns. You're not going to go house to house and get rid of like 500 million guns that have been accumulating, in every household for the past, multiple decades. And, if guns and numbers of civilians were really, really the problem, we would have a lot more dead people on the streets from guns than what we currently have. And it's statistically, sorry, I'll finish this. It's okay. Statistically, a lot of the numbers that you hear of gunshot deaths and stuff like that, they lump in the gunshots that were justified. Somebody that shot an intruder from coming in to rape his family or something. He shot him, but that gets thrown in gun violence statistics numbers. And also police, that end up shooting people justifiably. They get thrown in there. And also a lot of times they count exit wounds. So they'll say a person was shot 4 times when really they were shot twice. And there's legal loopholes that on paper, it looks horrible. But I live here. I'm in the U.S. I know hundreds of people that got guns. I walk outside, I'm not hearing any gun shooting. Maybe every now and then I'll hear Farmer Bill shooting at his farm, but I mean, there's not chaos in the streets, and if guns were the problem, that would be the case.
Yeah, you do bring up very good points, and I think what most people miss when they I think what most people miss in the debate of guns is that most people don't live in the US. And most people don't actually know how it is there. Sure, you get fed with a whole bunch of things through media, but I mean, you can say what you want about the media in the world.
well, that's what I was telling my Australian buddy. And I told him, what you see on TV, it's not always how it actually is. The media paints the U.S. to be so crazy. Like I live here and I see it and I'm like, okay, it looks absolutely nuts on the TV, but you don't see it. You don't see it in the communities. People are generally good. I think we're all kind of duped on a certain level by what they're feeding us in the media, like every day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode with me, Jonathan, and Gary Phipps. And like I said in the very beginning, this conversation will be split into 2 episodes, and you have just finished listening to part 1. Next Monday, next week as usual, I will publish the next episode and part 2 of our conversation, where we continue our discussion on gun rights, gun laws, and if we should have guns as normal average people. Have a nice day, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.